Since it's recorded, I just start off so so we don't miss out on time. But thank you and good afternoon, everyone, and good morning for myself. I don't know if anyone else is in another time zone. My name is Sugandha, and I am the co-founder and director at Center for Gender and Politics. It's an organization which has been working towards building research and enabling research on gender and politics with a focus in South Asia. And we've collaborated with GNITS today to bring this panel and where we will be talking about data and gender when it comes to political data today. And I have an esteemed panel with me today. I'll do a bit of introduction, and I think it would be, I'd invite the panelists to give more about their career journeys for the students to learn. Starting off with Manjula. And I'm really sorry, I don't think I'm going to pronounce your second name because I don't think I'll do a justice to that. But Manjula is the executive director of the Institute of Democratic Reforms, Institute for Democratic Reforms and Electoral Studies. And today he'll bring a lot of, I think, his experiences into electoral data, and we could learn more about his work. And Rahul Verma is a fellow at the Center for Policy Research. He is also a visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science at Ashoka University. We also had Kusum as one of our panelists who unfortunately couldn't join. She works at the World Economic Forum, and we hope, and she's also had a great journey, a career journey in working on political data. Sadly, she couldn't join us today. So I would just kick off by starting with Manjula. If you could walk us through the work you do, introduce your work to the students here, and introduce your experiences as well, and then we can move to other questions which should be more specific.
Thanks very much for inviting me to address this occasion. Then I'm really appreciated. So actually, the organization I'm representing is, as you stated correctly, actually the Institute for Democratic Reforms and Electoral Studies. It is one of election observation missions in Sri Lanka. There are 8 or 9 active election monitoring missions in Sri Lanka. However, we are going beyond that because this is the only accredited organization, not only for the observations. Actually, there are many observations groups. However, we are studying on electoral matters. Then we are doing both because actually election observation as well as research and studying on electoral matters additionally to electoral reform. That is our scope, that is our mandate of the organization. However, regarding this data and gender, then it is so critical in this development world, as well as actually it is totally relevant to Sri Lanka, like countries like Sri Lanka. You know that in Sri Lankan situation is not good, not healthy in this movement. Actually, that we have officially stated that as a bankrupted country, and we have stopped paying debt, world debts at the moment. However, actually that while mentioning that, let me to say that we have a good electoral culture, election culture in Sri Lanka, because we have received our universal franchise in 1931. After 91 years, we have been able to conduct 974 elections. Now we are heading to conduct another election, actually local government election, 75th election. In brief, if I am talking on the relevance in between the data and the gender, actually it is so important in this situation, because the one thing is actually according to the 2011 election, local government elections, we had only 88 female women representation in local councils of Sri Lanka. After the introduction of new election system in 2018, after that election, actually, we got over 2,000 women representatives at the moment. At the beginning, actually, we had only 88. Now we have over 2,000 women representatives in all those 341 councils. Then it is a bigger number. And also, once elected those female members, actually, or the whole society started to question what are the qualifications, what they have done for the society, what are the profiles of those women, like that. Then to answer all those questions, then the only way is in the only confidential, and also the permanent way is putting some data and let data to talk. That is the only way. That's why we are saying, actually, there's a quote, let me to quote it: if the statistics are boring, you have got the wrong numbers. That's why we need to talk on data, and we depend in why we are going to try to depend on data.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and also kind of introducing your views on the topic. I would just jump to Rahul as well to talk about his work at CPR and his I think opening remarks on the topic of data and gender.
Thank you, Sugandha, and thank you for inviting me today. And it's a great pleasure to share this platform with Manjula Gajanayake, if I'm pronouncing the second name right. Yesterday it was International Women's Day, so thank you again for asking me to share my views on a very important and timely topic, data and gender. I have been at CPR for now, this is my 5th year. Center for Policy Research, as some of you may know, is a very old research think tank in India. This is our 50th year. And so I lead CPR's work on politics. And we do a lot of, so CPR has lots of verticals. As we work on foreign policy, international relations, climate change, energy. There's a team on accountability and budgets, and then on city and institutions, on urban. So there are a wide variety of things happen at CPR, and I lead a small team which works on elections, politics, democracy, and those kind of questions. At Ashoka, I teach largely courses on quantitative methods, political parties, and voting behavior, and introduction to Indian politics. So largely that's the domain of my research. I'm a politics nerd, so I can talk about politics at 4 a.m. But I also, in some ways, train to work with numbers. So I largely work with public opinion polling data and all kinds of other election statistics. Now, just to briefly touch upon some very fine and interesting things Manjula mentioned, why should, so the question is, why should we, invest in studying data on gender and politics? So you can look at this question from 2 perspectives. One is just a normative concern, right? Which is what should be the level of inclusion of any group in important positions. And normatively, I don't think there is any debate or discussion. All groups should be getting at least fair share of their representation, if not higher. The second is much more empirical, and when I talk about data, I don't think of data just in terms of hard numbers, right? Like when I teach quantitative methods, to me, questions are important, and methods are just tools to answer the question. And so deploy all kinds of tools that are available to you to answer that question. So method and data is secondary to the question that you are trying to answer. In fact, the way I would like to think about some of these things is your question and the thing that you are probing will drive what kind of methods you can choose and what methods are much more suitable to study something. So then in my world, everything is data. A text is data. A conversation between two people is data. Policy documents is data, because all things can be converted into, if you want to say, quote unquote, numbers. You and I can have a disagreement on whether that measurement is a good or bad measurement, right? We can debate on it, but everything can be measured, right? From any concept you tell me, and I'll tell you how to measure it. We can disagree on whether this is a good measure or a bad measure, but things can be measured. And so in that sense, even experiential learning is information, data. So data in that sense is what is my observation or anybody's observation, which is empirically grounded. And the reason we need data on any subject, not just on gender and politics, is to figure out what are the deficiencies, why some things have worked and why some things have not worked, what kind of policy formulations that we can proceed, and how likely it is to succeed, right? We can have best intentions with the policy, but sometimes those policies, when it interacts with social political realities of our world, it produces lots of outcomes which we fail to anticipate, right? It's very difficult to anticipate all things that are possible once something becomes a reality. So in that sense, data, and that too high frequency data, right? And as many points as we can get data is important to be able to figure out what's going on. But I would also like to add a caveat here, which is we shouldn't be blindly just relying on data, right? At the end of the day, sometimes data is not available about something, which does not mean that the event or the phenomena has not occurred, or it hasn't occurred the way only data is telling you, right? So we need to be always also open to the realities which like data fails to capture, because at the end of the day, any sort of observation or data gathering or data collection or data generation, in fact, is a political exercise, right? There is politics involved in it. Who's gathering the data, what kind of data is being gathered, and how you are interpreting it. At the end of the day, there are political motives involved in it. And that's why we have to be always also conscious of that data may not be able to capture full reality. And my final point here would be that while there are always going to be such limitations of data, and we should be aware of other methods, we should also be not over-interpreting any data that we get, right? As a researcher, and this is how I also teach my students, our aim is to seek the truth, right? Which is where there is a difference between activists and researchers. And I'm not trying to, say anything good or bad about any of these two. Like each has its role. Like Shakespeare said, this world is a stage and each one has a role to play. Activists will interpret same data in a very, very different way because they have a very different role to play, right? They have to basically go beyond what just data is telling them to interpret. But as a researcher, if our job is to seek the truth, then we shouldn't be also over-interpreting any information that we are getting. So I'll stop here and happy to add whatever you.
I think thank you very much for sharing those thoughts and especially also raising the concerns that we should also look at, which is not over interpreting or rather wrongly interpreting data as well. In the last 3 years, when at CGAP we've been trying to kind of understand some of these issues and search more about what exists and what doesn't exist. And we conducted a roundtable around last year, and we found a lot of our participants talking about how starting from data collection to then data presentation of the data, and then eventually the availability of data being like there's so many layers of problems at every stage. For researchers to even invest in this subject to start with, what researchers are investing? Is it South Asian researchers? Is it Indian researchers in India, or is it somebody from outside? And how that can change the way we are looking at things. How are we looking at the data which is kind of broken, especially when the data hasn't been collected properly, and then eventually processing of data, which is also, of course, the big game changer eventually. So I think our investment in this topic just started off with saying that there is not enough data. When we look at, if you're trying to do comparisons, we are unable to do comparisons simply because we do not have comparable data. We try to do like a gendered understanding of elections in Germany, in Nepal. I don't know why I said not Germany, but I realized that, I mean, we found a lot of challenges in collection, or even language then becomes another issue of interpretation and doing comparisons, if we talk about comparison. Manjula, in your work, do you see similar issues, especially in election observations? I think elections still probably is like one of the most advanced data when we talk about political data and gender, but would love to know from your experiences as well. How do you see that as of now?
Yes, as I explained earlier, actually, if I am talking on Sri Lankan situations, actually, we have been able to conduct, held over 74 elections up to now. But around these lot of elections, I mean, conducting 74 elections means a huge number. Then you may think that how many set of data we have been collected, as well as on updated and uploaded on for public domain. But unfortunately, you know that the first thing is that actually that let me to say this thing, that if you can go through a set of data result sheet in a one election, what you can see. Actually, if you can observe a result sheet of, let's say, parliamentary election or any other general election, actually, that you can see candidates, how many votes they have collected, secured, as well as how many rejected votes, like that. But beyond that, we can invite for all students as well as practitioners and researchers. My understanding is that actually reading a set of data result sheet is just like reading dozens of sociology books or political science books. The reason is actually behind those numbers, behind those candidates' names, we can see what we can see, actually, the demography and geopolitical relationships, as well as maybe the ethnicity, as well as relationship of the ethnicity, as well as religion factors, and many things that we can see behind those numbers. When reading the election result sheet, actually, we are not only reading those numbers, because in Sri Lankan situations, that unfortunately, if I'm explaining the current situation, yes, that who are the official stakeholders, official institutions that the election results or any other relevant data is uploading, that may be publishing, maybe the election commission, as well as election observation missions like us, as well as some few research institutions in the country. But unfortunately, actually, what I am observing here is that we are just uploading, we are just publishing only the data and results only. That when I'm listening to our panelist, Mr. Verma, actually, he correctly mentioned that the importance of data, as well as what's the rationale behind all those data. But at the moment, let me just explain in Sri Lankan situation. We have conducted our national census in lastly, actually 12 years ago. It was in 2011 and 2012. In between, we have not conducted national level census in Sri Lanka. As well as regarding the election related details, actually, we are just like performing our duties only. Public servants or election management bodies, or even like us, observation missions are not going to analyze and putting up all those research data. That is the one of main problem in these areas we are tackling. Okay, then the other thing is actually when we are talking on election results, that we are conducting 5 kind of elections, including parliamentary, presidential, local government, provincial, as well as we have conducted only 1 election on as a referendum in 1982. But if you can see the internet, can you find finest data other than the how many votes secured by candidates? Actually, it is very difficult. That means we have not mainstreaming data in elections right now, not only Sri Lanka actually. Then when we are researching in South Asian countries, almost all countries are not given the prominence to search the behind stories of data and all the whole lot of the importance of the set of data. That is the main problem in here. But actually that the election relevant data when it comes to the gender aspect. Okay, now you may surprise that in our local elections, actually we have only in terms of our population, actually we have 22 million people, very comparing with India and other countries. I know it is a very small country, island country. However, in these local government elections, actually that there are over 80,000 candidates are contested. Out of 80,000 candidates, 23,000 women candidates are there. This is a huge number. However, other than that, we know only that number. Yes, 23,000, over 23,000 women candidates are contested in these elections. Other than that, we are not aware any other details related to these women, as well as not in women candidates, actually the whole candidates. Then where and who, by whom uploading or publishing these data? Then that is the main thing. That means in national level, okay, then national level, maybe the government, actually the government institution, they have not given prominence to publishing these data, not publishing only actually the research on data, and as well as the using these data to develop our countries. I mentioned earlier, actually, we are experiencing very bad economic situation here. The one of factor affected to that is actually that we are not given prominence to data security, and as well as investing for data.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. And I think you raised a very important topic about not having the story behind. And I think I do have a question around also missing out on the intersectional data when we talk about like women as a category, men as a category, all representatives as one, and not knowing what level of intersectionality do we have in this data, and how that could also kind of eventually drive our decisions. But before doing that, I think we've spoken about the missing data, or how it's important to invest in this subject. And we could move on to understanding how, in some ways, the existing data that we have so far has influenced policies, discussions and debates around women's representations. If we in the last couple of years, I know reservation has been like the 50% population has been taken up as that data to drive reservation for women, for example, in India, and we could probably think of similar ways in which with some sort of policy advocacy has happened over the last years around women representatives, and maybe electorates as well, if I may combine the question.
Okay, yeah. So a couple of points. First, I think, at least in the Indian case, there are some areas where we have a problem on the data front, much like Sri Lanka. We haven't yet also started our census, and certain long-standing sample surveys, which the Ministry of Statistics used to conduct. Many of them also have not happened in past few years, some largely owing to pandemic, but there are other problems. But while saying this, I would also like to stress on this fact that we have a lot of data. We are basically sitting on piles of data. There are two problems with it. Sometimes overproduction of data is also a problem, right? So if data scarcity is a problem, you get thrown data at you and you don't know what to do with that data. You are basically drowned in data, right? So if you think, just like I work on elections, I know at least on elections, on public opinion polling, as well as even economic matters, both from census and surveys, we can do a lot of analysis on gender patterns, both in politics, economy, and society. The bigger issue are two. First, to be able to analyze data, what are the questions that you want to analyze data on? And to me, and I may be wrong, I don't do that much work on gender, but a large portion of research on gender basically focuses only on the question of representation. How many candidates, how many women, how many winners, right? What's the female turnout? So what you're doing is just basically doing a very, very top level descriptive analysis. And we all know these numbers. Anyone who studies a little bit about gender and politics, these numbers should be on your fingertips, right? And so the questions are not changing. And which is perhaps people like you will have to take a leap forward, where the questions have to change. Questions have to be much more hard-hitting, much more sharp. Only then you can use the data that's available. Otherwise, there's 30% representation of women in civil services, 12% women in parliament. Like, women turnout has reached at the same level. These are basically just numbers, right? And so the questions are not changing. That's the first point. Second, are our universities training enough people to be able to analyze that data? Can you list me 10 university departments in this country in sociology, in political science, which train people to do data analysis? Economics department do, but then their focus is going to be just on one aspect, right? On the social, on the political, on other sides of the question. You don't have enough trained researchers, right? And those researchers also work with advocacy organizations and other things. So then, second problem is of training. The third problem is that we undervalue research. And we undervalue research not just at the government level, of course, because government sometimes have problem with the research that you produce. But even organizations that work in the advocacy space undervalue research. You talk down to people who do research as they're sitting in ivory towers and they don't know ground realities, right? And so So what we are doing, basically, we have developed a culture where we talk past each other. We don't care what you do and you don't care what we do. We might have some nice conversations here and there, but generally this relationship is not symbiotic, where we build upon each other's work and try to build a larger picture. It's just like you'll pick something from, when I say you, not meaning Sugandha or any organization or anything, but basically what I'm trying to tell is, like, as it's not basically a deep engagement, right? Where we together think of questions, together think of methods, together think of analysis, together create a ground where the data can be used in a much more sort of useful way. So we're basically sitting on what you can call, like in researchers' world, we are sitting on gold mines. But any data to become useful and usable, you'll have to first do the grunt work, right? Government does not produces data, or organizations that produce data, they don't produce it for researchers. They produce it for themselves, right? And so to be basically made researcher friendly, you have to put a lot of grunt work into it, basically cleaning them and making sure that things are aligned, and only then can. So this is like, if you think like a research is going to, like, final output will take 10 hours, at least 5 hours go into data cleaning, 3 hours in data analysis, perhaps only 2 hours in writing and interpreting the findings. And data cleaning is or data gathering or data is the hardest and most boring part. So my position here is that in all domains, we have enough data, but we basically are not able to use this data because we are not asking interesting questions. We don't have enough people who are trained to work with data, and we don't work in a symbiotic fashion. We don't have a culture of research. We talk past each other.
I think you hit the nail on the head with those points, and I'd like to underscore some of those, especially in terms of having more collaborations. Something that we have been trying to do as well, and starting off, we are into our third year of work at CGAP, and we've realized how incredibly difficult it is to have a think tank and try to build these collaborations and bring that focus and importance of research in this field, and getting the right stakeholders interested and invested in this field. And having said that, I think another bit that you touched upon in your second point about basically, I think having interest in quantitative data or training in data. I think given that this is a culmination of two different subject area, or rather three different subject area: data, gender, and politics, and they are kind of taught in, we don't know how much of interdisciplinary discussions and courses actually exist on this. As of now, we've seen that when we look at social sciences, and being a social sciences student myself, the emphasis on quantitative research has been more higher or higher valued. And I think, I don't know if it is an intentional practice, or is it something that just comes from the past research that has happened, and there's more value into that. And I think often a lot of students find themselves confused when they are overloaded with data, and how to build that data. The courses like data and storytelling nowadays to I think help some people to use these pieces of data and tie them together, glue them together into building the story they wish to produce. And yeah, I think like these intersections of different fields have also shown us how there could be innovations in interpretation of the data and usability of data. Some of the students in the university, I hope they're all engineers engineers, but they do study data sciences, and I think that's data is probably more natural strength to them at this point as against some of us who would have just focused on studying gender, like me, and or just political science, and did not engage in the intersection of data. So looking at the students as well as future career choices, if they wish to enter this field, and also look at the intersections of data and how data kind of goes into different fields, if not this one. And with that, I think Manjula, I'd like to also ask you if you would like to share your thoughts on finding innovations in using the data, and how in the last few years, maybe from your own work at the organization, but also your observations across, how data have been used innovatively, but also could be used for those who might be listening to us and would like to draw some inspiration and start their work.
Yes, thank you. Thanks again. Regarding your questions, actually, I can share some of important experience that we were engaging in recent past. However, before giving my answer, actually, I would like to say that I would like to echo that what Mr. Verma said here. Actually, that the one of particular questions is that actually I'm reading that the one of introduction given by the World Bank for their World Bank gender data portal. They are saying that they say that actually the World Bank's gender data portal makes the latest gender statistics accessible through compelling narratives and data visualizations to improve the understanding of gender data and facilitate analysis that inform policy choices. Then I always asking this question from myself, because yes, the World Bank, Asian Development Bank, IMF, that many international agencies and countries are providing finance to big, huge set of data. But the problem is actually when we apply such data, that most of set of data are not reader friendly or accessible. That is the main point actually. Then since we are using many social media platforms, it is very easy to create some reader friendly portal and use and disseminate such data, not only election, not only politics actually, that all those socio-cultural, geopolitics, political information that can be interrelated, attached to the ongoing discussions on elections and use. Then, but however, actually, that in Sri Lankan situation is those are not used in that. Having said that situation, the experience actually, let me to explain that the finest example in Sri Lankan situation. Last parliamentary election, we had actually that the number of voters in Sri Lanka at that time in 2020 actually almost 16 million. Out of 16 million voters, actually, the voter turnout was last election, it is actually 12 million. Then almost 4 million voters have been missing. Then if we are starting to search, that unfortunately, there's no any agency, any EMB or any government entity is updating those such data, and then that still we are trying to find actually who are included into those 4 million voters. Finally, Election Commission initiated a program that provide inclusive election process that some of international organizations also supported, like IFES organizations, as well as some of election monitoring missions, not only election monitoring missions, as well as disability rights based organizations, also like DOJF in Sri Lanka. Then we started a program that we know that earlier I mentioned that there's no national-wide data. Then we started that inclusive election process. Finally, we found that out of that 4 million, actually 3 million are in other countries. It is just related to out of country voting, because actually that those 3 million are living in abroad. That's why actually that the 4 million lack in voting in Sri Lanka. Other 10 million, out of 10 million, maybe 50% of voters, maybe actually 5 or 6 lakhs, 500 or 600,000 voters are included as persons with disabilities. Again, we know that according to the 2011 national census, there are 1.6 million persons, millions of persons with disabilities in Sri Lanka. Still we don't know how many disability voters of persons with disabilities in Sri Lanka out of that 1.6 million. Accordingly, Election Commission, with their annual voter registration process, additionally to the permanent form that they are disseminating in annual registration process, they included a special form that to gather data from all the households, whether there's any persons with disabilities. Then actually they were able to collect all the data. Now at least we know how many persons with disabilities are there. When they are preparing their election work, actually they can do homework successful way, because now they know how many persons with disabilities, especially the persons in all the sectors included into persons with disabilities. That's the way actually we can do. That's I can say that actually one of innovative ways that working the specialty. The particular thing is that actually that the not only government entity, that the right-based organizations, civil society organizations, international organizations, as well as the particular organization that Election Commission get together and done this. Then through this process, actually, we hope that there's a glimmer of hope that in next elections, that the Election Commission will use such data and provide more details, as well as register more persons with disabilities, and our voter turnout will be high in next election.
So thank you. That's a lot of interesting points raised, and I think one of the crucial ones, I feel, accessibility, which runs around the whole world, I feel. And how do we make that with cultural differences, linguistic differences, and ability differences? How do we make this data visually accessible, and not just visually, but probably people with ability differences even find ways of making it accessible for people with different accessibilities, and in addition to that, also how creatively I think we pull out this. You mentioned about government data and using civil societies, and it's raising another question. Maybe Rahul, you could quickly touch upon that. In terms of, I think, the credibility of data, and how do we ensure that the data that we're using is credible, but also letting the viewers know that this is credible. I mean, I think I don't want to divert too much into data collection, to be honest. But when we are using data to make a point, and we are using data to shape policies and talk about it, we must also be very sure of how we are using the data, and how we are what data we are using to start with. So I think those are some questions for students who would be interested in doing the research and might be in their early years. Like, these questions could be really important. I would love to hear your comments on innovations as well. I'm also thinking of heat maps that I've seen. I think ACLED does this map around violence, political violence, and I found that in some of our research found very interesting, similar patterns that exist. However, I'm yet to see much of that in South Asia, with a focus on South Asia.
Thank you, Sugandha. That's sort of like a hard question, but it will also require a very, very long answer because there are too many questions. I think, how does data get used or in organization like us in every shape and form, right? Like within 1 year or 2 years, I can remember the migration team using information on migration and talking during pandemic, how migration, like what can be done for children and women, especially during the pandemic and that long march many people did. I remember some researchers here working on what would be the role of women in gig economy, right? Since that's now sort of like new thing that is emerging. We had a discussion on what role women are going to play in international relations, so feminist-centric discussion. In politics, we keep doing these things. So I think accountability initiative uses data to basically look at what kind of gender like component in the budget is for women and children. So in that sense, I think a lot of organizations, researchers, government do rely on sort of like data to formulate policies. Governments don't formulate policies without data, right? That's why they conduct so much of data gathering exercise. Whether the policy works or not, whether the data that they are relying on is credible or not, or that's sufficient or not, those are different questions, right? That's why you see like each government has like whole division ministry, which basically their job is to just gather data. But there's like apart from the problems that I mentioned previously, you also think of it, which is each department collects its own data, right? And their data collection, so everyone is trying to collect data for their own usage. And the problem is that because those data get aggregated, for example, revenue department will collect data on revenue circles. Development administration will collect data on blocks and districts, right? Elections are basically at, say, polling station or constituency level. Now, each of these have separate boundaries. And so to basically collate these three data together is a nightmare, right? Because you can aggregate this at the state level, but then state is too large, right? In India, like I think more than half of the states are larger than Sri Lanka, right? And so if your data aggregation exercise is happening at a much higher level, then you can't do sort of like very fine-grained analysis to figure out what's happening, right? Is there a connection between administrative development data with constituency level indicators? If I want to find, does electing, like normatively, it may seem great to elect women, but does electing women mean something better for society and women? I don't know, because that's basically very hard to test. They may be as good and as bad as men, right? So normative question aside, empirical testing sometimes become harder because data is gathered at very, very different level. But just to sort of like, because we are also running short on time, let me, from my own sense on different indicators, there are green shoots in the data. And on International Women's Day, I should end with some positive things rather than just only despair. There is like the recent rounds of surveys, despite some sort of not setback, things are improving. I think almost every count that I can think for women, right? So, and I wrote a piece also on this, that women turnout has gone up. There are more women contesting. Of course, we don't have a pipeline from villages to parliament, but more women are contesting. Women literacy has gone up. More women are getting into STEM fields. They are looking for jobs, right? They want to marry later, want to have fewer kids. So all sorts of like green shoots are visible in the data. The question is, and which is where all of us have to think, is what would be the pace of change in the future? Will it be sort of like as it has been, slightly moving forward but slowly, or we are sitting on a cusp of sort of like inflection where change can be fast paced? And in that regard, I'll touch back upon my second point, is that now it's time to think of different questions, get more training in terms of being able to use data, and data in a much more effective way for policy formulation, right? And so there has to be now a feedback loop where data is not just a sort of like additional tool, in the report, kuch chart bana do, have some graphs so it looks more robust, but sort of feedback loop. And this is also to answer your question on credibility of data. It's difficult to figure out the credibility of data, right? Because data generation process is a political exercise. And so, not just what governments or civil society researchers or just researchers produce, there is always going to be some biasness creeping into the data, either person's political or biases, or just biases because of bad implementation on the ground, right? Sometimes those biases also creep into it. As a person who works on the data, your credibility depends on how transparent you are about the data that you collected and what you are interpreting. So if I can see how your data was gathered, how you are analyzing it, what kind of results you are putting forward, I can also find what flaws there might be in the data. So any research that I do, I like to be as transparent as I can be, because I know there are always going to be some discrepancy in the data. There is no perfect data, right? Data is as credible as researchers' intention might be. If I send 5 people to do research, I always get asked questions in training. How do you know that this will be fair data which researchers will be bringing from the ground? I don't know. I can put some trackers in your mobile and other things, just to make sure some monitoring. But those who want to fudge things, they will find more innovative ways to fudge things, right? And so the way I want to work is of course trust my researchers, but being transparent in the way everything was done. And so people can basically find out, okay, these were the deficiencies, that's why we are getting this answer. If we reduce those deficiencies, not eradicate completely, because it's very difficult to get away with all the problems, then what would be the possible results? So credibility of data depends on your being transparent in its collection and analysis. Because at the end of the day, some data is better than no data, right? So I can work with bad data if I know the biasness, but if there's no data, then I'm just shooting things in the air. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, I think I very well agree with you. I also see Manjula smiling. I think he also agrees very well. I can see those that agreement here. I think I wish we could go more in depth on solving some of these issues as well, and perhaps discussing more into some of the very important questions both of you have raised today, from accessibility of data, having data and having not having data, and also having too much data, and more importantly, asking the right questions, and also kind of reflecting on the questions we have asked so far and seeing how we could improve on those and build on those sometimes. And also kind of looking at how do we use and build from the data that exists, and the future of what we could do. And hopefully we continue these conversations and we'll be able to ask more and more questions. I think answers are for all of us to solve, and I don't think we'll have those answers right away. But I think I hope the participants and the people who are in the room listening could gather some reflections and thoughts and have some learnings from what has been talked today, from the questions that have been raised today. I thank everyone who has joined today, to the panelists for taking out this time and bringing these issue or like rather set of issues when we talk about this subject. And happy International Women's Day. I'm glad that GNITS has hosted this event, and we were able to partner and bring this panel to bring out some of the very interesting topics. Yesterday, we had a panel on gender norms and navigating in politics. We had a member of parliament from Bhutan, somebody from Nepal, and also somebody who's worked in Afghanistan. And I'm happy that we are able to kind of bring these different perspectives across South Asia and talk about some of the challenges, common challenges, and some of the differences that exist. Hope we continue this discussion. Hope research stays relevant in all the conversations that we have in this topic. And have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sugandha, and nice meeting you, Manjula. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.